Let's start with the agenda. So we are going to cover strategy for fitting multiple regression models. So this is continuation of what we were doing last time. We'll also look at some problems that come up because of several explanatory variables. And one of the major problems is called multicollinearity. So we are going to look at what is multicollinearity and also like how we can assess them. Now consider an example where the data is salaries for professors, and this data set has 397 observations with 6 variables. And you may notice that some of the variables are not continuous. For example, rank. So this is a factor with levels such as assistant professor, associate professor, and professor. So there are 3 different levels. Similarly, discipline, whether somebody has a theoretical background or if the discipline of this professor is applied. Years since PhD, years in service, so those are obviously continuous variables. Sex or gender is again a factor variable with male and female as levels. And salary here is the response variable. So we want to develop a model so that given information on these explanatory variables, we can get an estimate of what is the likely salary. So that's the idea. So when we run a multiple linear regression with all variables, what R does is it automatically handles factor variables or factor independent variables in a certain way. Although rank is one variable, you can see, but you will notice that there are 2 rows related to rank. One is rank associate professor and other is rank professor. So what usually we do when we have factor type of independent variable, we create something called a dummy variable where each variable or each dummy variable basically has 2 values, either 0 or 1. So how do we do that? So if you see all the 3 levels for a professor variable, rank variable, assistant professor, associate, and full professor, whenever a person belongs to a particular level, so that will be 1, others will be 0. So professor here, for example, somebody is a professor, then this level will take a value of 1 and other 2 levels are going to be 0. Similarly, if somebody is an associate professor, so that will become 1 and other 2 values will be 0. And similarly for assistant professor, this is 1, other 2 are 0. But you may notice actually when we use this information in the model, we don't really need all the 3 dummy variables. We can easily say when this is 0 and this is 1, so we should treat that person as a professor. And then for an associate professor, this value will be 1 and this will be 0. And when both are 0, automatically that should mean we are talking about the third category or assistant professor. So when a factor variable has 3 levels, what we see is we really need 2 dummy variables. So when you have n levels for an independent variable or independent factor variable, if you use n minus 1 dummy variables, you'll be fine. We don't have to do this manually because R automatically takes care of this. So automatically it has created rank associate professor and rank professor as 2 dummy variables. And discipline was a factor variable with only 2 levels. So it says discipline B So which automatically means that when this is 0, we are talking about discipline A. And same thing with the sex variable. So this one is for male. So when in the equation this value is 0, automatically it means that we are talking about female. But the way we run this model is straightforward. We do the same thing that we have been doing so far. And one thing you'll notice that I have taken a shortcut here. So salary tilde, instead of writing each and every variable name, if we simply put a dot or a full stop, so that automatically means we are talking about all other variables. So all other variables as an independent variable. So this is the example with some of the independent variables being factor variables. Now what we do here, when we look at p-values, we find that the variable named sex is actually not statistically significant. So we can do dot minus variable sex, and then we only have a model where all the variables that are significant are included. So once we have this model, and suppose this is our final model, then we can write regression equation as salary equals intercept B1 rank associate professor, the coefficient times rank professor plus discipline B times the coefficient and so on. So that becomes our equation. And this equation can be used for estimating the outcome for any new person. Let's say if the new person is joining at the rank of assistant professor, and we don't see that in our model. So what we do is, to make a prediction for assistant professor, this whole part is going to become 0. So this times 0 plus this times 0. So that part becomes 0. And depending on in which discipline this person is going, if this person is going to discipline B, then we retain discipline B. But if this person is going to discipline A, then discipline B also becomes 0. I have this file, and I have also indicated like which slides these refer to. Since I have already installed these packages, and when I run the library, they will run fine. But before I go to the example, let me also mention one more thing. And for those of you who use Markdown files, and especially when you have many libraries, sometimes there could be some issues. So let me show you what exactly I mean. So if I want to create R Markdown, and I'll simply give a title of BK. And get rid of these things. So if I want to use these libraries in R Markdown and just copy and paste everything in a chunk, and let me give this a name. So save as week 8 example. And now if I simply want to knit this to Word file, and then download this file. So you notice there are a lot of messages for like each package, and just after running your libraries, you have already created a 4-page document. So that's really a wastage of all these pages. So this is for the libraries. So after R, if you give some space and say include equals true or false, so let's say false, and then we can knit this file again. And then download the file. So this is the Word file. So all that unnecessary output is not there. So that was a small thing I wanted to make sure you know, to avoid unnecessarily making your assignment or work too lengthy. We need all the libraries, so I'm going to run this. So this is the data we used. Salaries. So the data frame has 397 observations, 6 variables, and this is the model that we made. So this is the same model that you saw earlier. Now let me include a few more things. I'm going to save independent samples in IND. So basically I'm going to split salaries data into 2 parts. One I'll call training, other I'm going to call testing. And we'll take independent samples. So we are going to take 2 independent samples, and number of row, we can say whatever number of rows we have in salaries data, and then replace. So replace means it says should sampling be with replacement or without replacement. So I'm going to say with replacement, and let's use probability and say we want to split this data into 50-50. So 50% will go to training and 50% we want to use in testing. So once you run this, you can see in the third window this IND is created. If you simply select IND and run, so it's just an array of numbers, just ones and twos. So roughly 50% of the numbers are ones and 50% of the numbers are twos. And what we are going to save in training data is salaries, and within salaries, with a square bracket, we can say IND equals. Actually, for equal in R, we have to say equal equal. When IND is equal 1, so that's which row. And then after that, if you put a comma and enter nothing, it means that we want all the columns, but only those rows where the numbers are 1. So for example, second, third, fourth. So those numbers are 1. So second, third, and fourth samples within salaries will go into training data. And the first one is 2. That means first row will go to testing. And then fourth will go to testing, and so on. Similarly, we'll do testing. So all those rows where these numbers are 2 will become part of testing. So if you run line number 20 and 21, you can verify in the third box that testing has 196 and training has 201 observations. Whenever we say 50-50, it doesn't mean that the numbers are going to be exactly same. So it is roughly 50%, approximately 50%. It could be slightly more, it could be slightly less. If you want to look at training data, so let's say head, actually first few rows of training data, hit enter. This is what you see. So second, third, fourth, sixth, second, third, fourth, fifth goes to testing, so sixth, and then these ones. So that's how this is made. What I see here and what you see on your computer may be different, because we did not set a seed in the beginning, and these numbers were created in a very random way, but we can fix that. So if all of us use a specific number, let's say 25, and actually before running this, if I run IND again, and you look at IND, you'll see the numbers keep on changing. If I run this line again and look at IND, so first one was 1 and then 3 2s, it's going to change. But once we run set.seed and look at one IND, like 2 1 2 1 and so on, and try again. So because of set.seed being same number, you will see the pattern is exactly same, which means your training and test data will be exactly same as mine. There won't be any change. So let's do that. So now all of us will have 196 in the training data and 201 in the testing data. So typically we make a model M. Our response variable is salary as a function of all other variables, and the data we are using is training. And if you do summary, you may see that the results could change compared to what we had earlier. When we have many independent variables, like for salary you have, so one is the response, so you have 5 independent variables. Typically there could be so many different permutations and combinations that you could use. You could start with one variable each first and then keep on adding more and more, or you can start with everything. So there are different strategies people follow, but one way could be you try all possible steps. OLS is ordinary least squares, and if you want to try all steps, save it in all. So you can see there are 31 rows, and under predictor you have at least one variable. There could be a model where we say that none of the variables are significant, no variable, independent variable is used. So even that could be a model. If you add that to this list, so 31 plus 1 becomes 32. And that number 32 is nothing but 2 raised to number of independent variables. 2 to the power of 5 in this case. So that's nothing but 32. And what it gives you is that it runs actually all possible combinations and gives you R square, adjusted R square, and CP, one of the metrics related to AIC. And the idea is that, let's say if you want to use adjusted R square, so obviously you want to use that combination that gives you maximum adjusted R square. There is also a function called step IC, and it uses AIC criteria for selecting the best model. So lowest AIC gives you the best model. And again, running this is very easy. M is our model that we created with our training data, and we are going to say direction as both forward and backward. So run that and then run summary of the model. It will give you the best possible model based on AIC. So it will automatically remove those ones which did not do well. When you use this direction as a forward, basically the algorithm will start with no predictors in the model. So basically your model only has an intercept and no predictors. And then one by one, it keeps on adding the most contributing independent variable or predictor to the model. And it is going to stop when there's no statistically significant improvement, when more terms are added. So basically that's called forward method. And similarly, there is a backward elimination. So it moves in the opposite direction. You are starting with all predictor variables or all independent variables, and then one by one you remove the least contributing independent variable from the model, and you stop when you have a model where all predictors are statistically significant. And what happens in both, when the direction we say is both, it becomes a combination of forward method and backward method. And actually this also starts with no predictors, and then one by one keeps on adding the most contributing independent variable to the model. After adding each new variable, it removes any variable that is no longer providing any improvement to the model. That way, it is a combination of both. And typically, when you have created your model based on the training data, you want to assess the model using the test data. So what we do is we store the predictions in P. So we use this function called predict, and this best model is called model. So I'm going to type model, and then we provide testing data and run. If you want to check in console what this P is, so you can run head P. You'll find that these are salary predictions for the first, third person, fifth person, eighth person, and so on. If you want to check or compare this with actual in the testing data, so we can say salary. So you can see the actual salary for this person was 139,750K, and the model is not very far, slightly lower, but 135.6K. For the third person, it was actually 79.7K, and the model predicts 84.6K, and so on. But the way we compare them is we plot them on a scatter plot. So that's what I'm going to do here. So may not be the best model here, but if you want to find correlation and then find R square, correlation between the two, P comma testing $sign. So correlation is about 0.64. Let me store this in C, and then we can say R2 for R square is C raised to 2. So about 40.8. In the test data, this is what it does. If you do this plot for training data, obviously it may be better, but test data is something which the model has not seen, so the performance is not going to be that great. But this is the real test of the model, where it is trying to predict salary for people who have not been included in the original data where model was created. One more thing I want to add with this data, sometimes for a given data, we might be interested in an interaction term or joint effect of two variables on response. So let's say our model is, so suppose this is our model, and we look at the summary that we have seen earlier. Suppose we want to run this model in such a way that we want to explore all possible interactions or joint effects, like two variables working together. Doing that is very easy. So let me copy this and paste it again so that you see the difference. So the way we do this is we say dot star dot. So dot is like all independent variables, and star is times all independent variables. When you run that and then run summary again, and you can see now there are so many coefficients. So rank associate professor versus discipline B, so that joint effect is included. Rank professor versus discipline B, so all possible combinations are included. Obviously many of them are not significant, but some are. So for example, discipline B versus years in service, so there is a star. Having run that, if you know that you want to include only one of the interactions, not everything, what you could do is you can add, I simply want to include combination of discipline and years in service. So discipline, it will have all independent variables and then also include this interaction term that we may be interested in. So if you run that and run summary, you'll see that all independent variables are there, and then you also have this interaction term discipline versus years in service. Now, what exactly does this interaction term mean? So let me explain that using a plot. And one more thing actually, if we run salaries data structure, sometimes if the discipline variable is represented by ones and twos, so R will not notice that actually it is a factor variable. It may say that it is an integer because it only sees like ones and twos and thinks it is an integer. But when we are analyzing data, we know that this variable is factor. So we may have to convert occasionally a variable that is being shown as an integer variable to a factor variable. And doing that is very easy, although it's not needed, but I can show you so that you can use it at right places. Let's say salaries $ discipline we want to treat as factor. So we simply say as dot factor salaries $ discipline. So that line always converts your variable to a factor variable. In this case, it is redundant, but I'm just showing you just in case. Let's use those two variables and I'll make a plot to clarify what interaction is. We want to connect this Control Shift M for that pipe symbol, percentage greater than percentage. ggplot AES aesthetics. I'm going to put years of service on x-axis, and on y-axis our response variable salary, and then we'll differentiate the data points by color coding discipline variable like A and B. So we can say color is equal to discipline, and once we are doing ggplot, we have to use plus sign to add geometric shape. We want to do scatter plots, so we'll use point. This will look like this. Let me also add one more line, stat underscore smooth. So I want to add lines, so we don't want the confidence band, so standard error equals 0, and method will say within quotes linear method. So this is what you see. So you'll notice that people who are in department A, so the professors, assistant, associate, and full professors who belong to department A, which is a theoretical discipline, so rate of increase you can see in their salary over the years is lower compared to people who work in department B, which is like more applied. So the rate at which, although there is a lot of variability, but on an average you'll find that rate at which the salaries increase for people in discipline B is greater. So that's exactly what interaction does. So it has a different impact on the response variable at different levels. So discipline at level A, it exhibits one type of response between salary and years of service, and when it is discipline B, it exhibits a different type of response compared to what we saw with A. So in a very simple way, we can detect if there is a interaction between the two terms if the lines cross each other. If there is a cross, some kind of cross that we see here, if lines are parallel, that means there is no interaction effect. If lines crisscross, that means there is an interaction effect. And our p-value can indicate whether that interaction effect is significant or not. So we can always do a null hypothesis that beta for this interaction equals 0. And if our p-value is more than 0.05, we can reject, actually we cannot reject null hypothesis. But this picture actually tries to bring forward the idea of interaction nicely. If you see a cross, interaction is present. If you don't see a cross, interaction is not present. So there's a question, should variables which interact with each other in statistically significant way be excluded from the model because they are not independent? It may be difficult to say they are independent or not, because the scatter plot is not between the independent variables. The scatter plot is between the response and the independent variable. So usually if interaction is significant, we should not ignore it. We should include it in the model. And usually experts also say that, let's say if you have a variable, independent variable A and independent variable B, so if interaction between A and B is significant, so you should include even A and B in the model even if they are not statistically significant. So the answer to the question is that we should include interaction effects if they are significant. So when do we say they cross? If they are not parallel, somewhere they are going to cross. It's not the question of zero or some range, but if the lines are not parallel, then we assume that they are going to cross. In this case, they are slightly touching each other, but there could be a case where interaction is statistically significant, and in the picture you see two lines which are not parallel and they do not meet also. That also can happen, but it's not necessary that they should cross in this picture itself. One more thing I have showed you earlier also, but I will show you again. It is good to be aware of all these like different ways we can, or different strategies we may use, or different tools that we have, because sometimes you may have to think about like how you want to make adjustments to your model so that it can improve. Polynomials are something very easy to do in R. I'm going to copy this again and paste it here. Now for the time being, let's say we want to forget about all other variables. We just focus on years of service, and we want to make a model where salary equals B0 plus B1 years of service plus B2 years of service square plus B3 years of service cube, and so on. So how do I do that in R? We use a function called POLY, and then years service, comma, I'm only going to use up to 4 just because it is easy to do. We should not go overboard by doing like to the power of 10 or to the power of 20. So if you run this, you get this summary where to the power 1 is significant and even to the power 2 is significant. Third and fourth, those two are not significant. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. Before going there, because there were some questions regarding interaction. So the interaction is not between A level of discipline and B level of discipline. So we say the interaction is between discipline and years in service if and only if at different levels of discipline the relation between salary and years of service are different. Then we say there is an interaction between variable discipline and years of service. If at different levels the impact is different, as you can see from the lines, then only we say there is an interaction. So I showed you like different ways you can modify your variables. You can include polynomials, you can include interactions. There are so many different things you could do. And not only that, selecting important variable in the multiple linear regression itself is a big task, especially when there are many independent variables. So with real data sets, it's not difficult to see 30, 40, 50, even 500 or even 1000 variables, independent variables. So it is very common to see a data set which has a lot of variables. So F ratio and related p-value can indicate at least one explanatory variable is important. We have been using that. And individual p-values can lead to false conclusions when the number of independent variables is large. So if you're talking about like a lot of independent variables, I used a data set where I had 1500 independent variables. So when you have so many t statistics and so many p-values related to each, there is a chance that sometimes we may make false conclusions. Usually when number of explanatory variables is large, not all may have significant contributions. And also trying different combinations can lead to a large number of models. So you have seen 2 to the power of k. If k is number of independent variables, then the number of possible combinations could be 2 to the power of k. So if you have 10 variables, so that can give you 2 to the power of 10, 1024 different combinations. And if you have 20, suddenly you are looking at a very large number. So it grows at a very fast pace. So obviously some strategies are needed to tackle these situations. And we talked about forward selection, where we start with no predictor in the model, no explanatory variable or independent variable in the model. And then one by one, we add that variable that contributes most. And this method stops when improvement is no longer statistically significant. The second one, backward elimination, it starts with all variables in the model. So it goes in the opposite direction. And one by one removes the least contributing independent variable. And it will stop when you have a model where all predictors are statistically significant. Mixed selection is the one where we used both. It's basically a combination of both forward and backward. We start with no predictors, and then we keep on adding the most contributing predictor, what we do in forward selection. And after adding each new variable, we remove any variable that no longer provides improvement in the model. So that's something similar to backward elimination. So it is a mix of two. One place where backward elimination is unlikely to work is where you have a data set where number of rows are much smaller than number of columns. So typically there is a rule of thumb that if you want to do regression, if you want to create a regression model, let's say with one variable, so for that one variable, at least you should have 10 rows of data. So if you have 10 variables, about at least 100 rows of data. But if you have a data set where, let's say you have 500 independent variables and only 50 rows or 100 rows, so much smaller than how many variables you have. So in those cases, a backward elimination is not possible. Actually, you cannot create a model with 500 independent variables where there are only 100 or 50 rows of data. So there we may have to stick to forward selection. You start with one, so that way you can at least one by one you can get rid of the ones that do not work. Now if you consider our data that we had seen earlier, all backs, where volume and area were two independent variables and weight of the book was the dependent variable. So what I did was, apart from those two, I also created two more variables, x3 and x4. And these two variables are basically random numbers from normal distribution, which means that they should not be significant because it's basically noise, random noise. And in the model, you can see that the model correctly indicates that the p-value is very high, and basically their betas are not very different from 0. So null hypothesis cannot be rejected. So these betas should be treated as more or less 0. Now sometimes we also want to check, if we have like two models, we want to check whether the reduced model is still valid or we need to stick to the full model. For example, this is a reduced model, we have only two variables, and this is a bigger model with four variables, although two are not significant. Contribution R square 93.5, 92.8, that also indicates that adding these two variables is basically not adding too much information. And in fact, if you look at adjusted R squares, adjusted R square is even higher for only these two. But if you want to do a test, a formal test, we can make use of ANOVA. So I stored this model in full, and I stored this model in RED just to indicate that this is a reduced model. So you have model 1 and model 2. So model 1 is reduced and model 2 is full model. This is basically called partial F test. We use ANOVA for that, and the p-value that we get is 0.5822. And what are we testing? If you compare these two, we are testing that beta 3 equals beta 4 equals 0. So that's our null hypothesis, and alternate is that at least one of them is not 0. But based on this result, we cannot reject null hypothesis because p-value is much higher than 0.05, and accordingly we can conclude that the variables x3 and x4 do not contribute significantly or significant information to predicting weight based on this model. Coming to an important topic with many variables, many independent variables, it's called multicollinearity. For a regression of y, which is the response on k explanatory variables or independent variables, let's say they are like x1, x2 up to xk, it is hoped that these variables will be highly correlated with the dependent variable y. That's what we want. A relation is sought that will explain a large portion of variation in y. Our R square should be very high if it is explaining large part of the variability. So that's what we hope for. But each data set is different and it has unique and peculiar things going on. Now, it is not desirable to have strong relation among explanatory variables. We don't want x1 to xk related to each other, because that's going to create a lot of problems. And in fact, when explanatory variables are correlated with one another, the problem of multicollinearity is said to exist. So one example, the manager of Pizza Lean-To, so this is the company name, has been running a series of ads in a local newspaper. The ads are scheduled and paid for in the month before they appear. Each of the ads contain 2 for 1 coupon, which entitles bearer of the two pizza lean to pizzas while only paying for the more expensive one. The manager has collected data on falling slide and would like to use it to predict pizza sales. So this is the data where variable x1 is number of ads, x2 is cost of ads, and y is total sales. So very easy, we can fit a model y as a function of x1 plus x2. Now what I did here was I created three separate models, and the idea is basically to highlight the problem of multicollinearity. So this is the model with just x1 sales versus x1. So x1 is number of ads. This is y versus x2 cost. So you find in the first one the variable is statistically significant. So this is much less than 0.05. So we reject the null hypothesis that beta 1 is equal to 0. And the model contributes 62.52% to the overall variability. So x1 contributes a lot. And x2, the cost of ads, so that also is statistically significant. And you can also see this contributes about 67% variability. This explains 67.43% of the variability in the sales. So both are significant. But when we make a model with x1 plus x2, a strange thing happens. We find that none of the two variables are statistically significant. So there is obviously a contradiction. The variables are individually significant but not together. What is the reason? So reason is given here. What exactly happened? So this is a classic case of multicollinearity. You might wonder why these two variables are not perfectly correlated. So we are talking about x1 and x2. So this is because the cost of ad varies slightly depending on where it appears. So in the newspaper, front page, last page, and so on. So there could be some variability there. So x1 and x2 correlation coefficient is 0.9, which is very, very high. You can see here. Since x1 and x2 are closely related to each other, they explain the same part of the variability in y. That is why we get R square of 0.62 in the first simple regression and 0.67 R square in the second simple regression. But when you combine, we don't see a very high contribution. We only see 68% of the variability being explained, and also each of the variables not being statistically significant. So adding the number of ads as a second explanatory variable to the cost of ads is explaining only about 1% more. So all kinds of problems you can see are happening here. Now the key question is we have 68%. So which variable is really explaining variation in total sales in this multiple regression? Obviously we have to say both, but we cannot separate out their individual contributions because they are so highly correlated with each other. So how to deal with these situations where we see multicollinearity? One approach could be throw out some explanatory variable. So if there are two variables, they are contributing in a similar way, we don't need both. So one of them is redundant. So why not exclude that variable? Another way is to get more data or redefine variables. So do something with the variables so that you can separate their effects out. And one of the options listed is stepwise regression. Why we do not want multicollinearity? What is the problem? The problem is, if you go back, The standard error for x1 was 0.5473, and when both of them are present, you see the standard error increased almost like more than 2 times. Same thing with x2. It was 0.66 and now it becomes almost 1.6. So the standard deviation of regression coefficients will be very large, and because they are large, t ratios, what is t ratio? So you know that the t value is nothing but estimate divided by the standard error. So 2.12 divided by 0.54, that's what this number is, 3.87. Similarly 2.87, so this column divided by second column is your third column everywhere. If your error is high, your t value is going to come down. You see 3.8 became 0.5. And when t value is small, obviously your probability or p value is going to go up. T ratios will be small, and we may think we do not need variables when actually they are needed. Similarly, regression coefficient estimates will be unstable because of high standard errors. So whenever variability is more, your estimates are obviously not very stable. So B1 plus minus that 1.96 times standard error. So that interval will become bigger if your standard errors are bigger. So coefficient estimates will not be stable. Because of high standard errors, reliable estimates are hard to obtain. So the margin of error is going to be big. And signs of the coefficients may be opposite of what is intuitive or reasonable. So sometimes even the sign can change. So one time it is plus, other time it can become minus. So dropping one variable from the regression will cause large changes in the estimates of other variables. So whenever you see that kind of thing happening, so it's indicating that you have a multicollinearity problem. You may not have started by plotting like scatter plot and looking at correlation values, but when you start seeing these things in your model, that's a clear-cut indication that there's likely to be multicollinearity problem, which is causing all these kind of things. So you remove one variable, suddenly everything changes drastically. But how do we detect? Suppose you are suspicious of something is going on related to multicollinearity. So one way is you can do scatter plot, but there are also numeric method that can help you to detect multicollinearity. You can compare pairwise correlations between explanatory variables, and rule of thumb is that multicollinearity may be a serious problem if any of the pairwise correlations are more than 0.5. So this method basically highlights when multicollinearity problem may be present. So to determine if one x is related to another in the model, we can regress each x on other x's in the model. That is, let x1 to xk be your explanatory variables or independent variables. So what we do is we perform regression of, let's say, one of those variables on remaining k minus 1 and call the coefficient of determination from whatever we get out of this. So suppose that value is rj square. So that's the r square related to that jth variable. And we define variance inflation factor VIF for variable xj as 1 divided by 1 minus rj square. So that's the formula for variance inflation factor. So a VIF can be computed for each x variable. So you can do it for the first one, second one, third one, and so on. And it is the measure of strength of relation between each explanatory variable and all other explanatory variables. So if there is no relationship, so for example, if you look at this formula, if xj variable is not related to remaining k minus 1 variables in any way, that means r square will be 0. And if r square is 0, then you are left with 1. So variance inflation factor will be simply 1. So that's a good thing. If you get a low VIF value, that's a good thing. But if your RJ square is high, obviously it cannot be 1. In real life, we never have r square equals 1. But if it is close to 1, like 0.9 or 0.99, so you can see that VIF is going to inflate. It can become bigger and bigger and bigger. If RJ square is 0.9, then VIF is going to be 10. So one rule of thumb is that whenever your VIF is more than 10, that's an indication that multicollinearity problem is present. You cannot avoid like little bit of correlation between X variables, even if they are like independent of each other. In real life, like if you calculate correlation, you will always find it is not 0. So, but how large is large? Is 0.1 large, 0.2 large? So statistically, we can find that out by calculating VIF. Now, why is it called a variance inflation factor? So some theory is given here. So if you consider this multiple linear regression model with only 2 predictors, and if you denote your correlation coefficient between 1 and 2 as R12, then it's not difficult to show that the variance of the coefficient is given by this equation. In this formula, you'll see that the variance of the coefficient gets larger as the value of R or correlation coefficient increases. If this becomes large and large, obviously it will not be 1, but when it is 0.9 or 0.99, this variance is going to be higher and higher. Thus, correlation amongst the predictors increases the variance of the estimated regression coefficient. So one example with 0.99 here, variance is as high as 50.25. So 50 times more compared to r square equals 0. So therefore the term 1 divided by 1 minus r square is called variance inflation factor. Now let rj square that we had seen earlier denote the value of r square obtained from regression of xj on the remaining. Then instead of earlier equation, we can rewrite that as this. So here 1 divided by 1 minus rj square is called jth variance inflation factor. There is one more data set. This is about mineral compositions. So I'll do this in R also. A mineral composition of 25 rock specimens, and each composition consists of percentage by weight of 5 different minerals. In the data set, basically they are labeled as, you can see A, B, C, D, and so on. So that comes from this A, B, C, D, and E. And apart from that, you also have a variable called depth of location, which is this one, and response variable is porosity. So this is the percentage of void space that the specimen contains. So this is the data, and this is the structure of the data. But if you want to get information about the variables, you can run question mark and the name of the data set, and you will see all the information that is needed. Now, one key thing here is that this ABCD, these variables, these 5 variables out of the total variables, they add to 100 because these are percentage, like what percentage is A, what percentage is B. So 5 together, it's 100%. Now, currently this data is not really in the data frame format that we are familiar with. So we are converting this into data frame by running this line. And now if you look at structure of the data, and in fact, I gave a new name now. We are calling it data. This is our familiar format. If you want to plot the plot that I showed you, so this is the plot you saw in the PowerPoint. There is another interesting variation of this plot that I'm going to show you now. You can run it using chart.correlation. This is coming from Performance Analytics library that I have used at the beginning. And then you say data and run. It's a similar output, but it also tells you that which of the correlations are statistically significant. So you have 1 star, 2 star, and 3 star, and which ones are not. So all that information is also provided. And when we run this, we get the summary. And in the summary, you'll notice that E has NAs. So basically, variable E is redundant because A plus B plus C plus D plus E is 100%. Basically, information contained in A, B, C, D is sufficient. We don't really need E because put together it's 100. So if you have information about first 4, fifth one is obvious. It's not adding any new value. But what you find interesting is R square 93%. 93% of the variability is being explained by this model, and none of the variables are significant. So nothing here is significant. Obviously, you see something suspicious here. You have this plot, you have this model, and there should be a question mark in your mind, like why this outcome, when you can clearly see that porosity has good correlation with A, good correlation with B, good correlation with C. So there are a lot of contributions and very good ones actually. 3 star, 3 star, 2 star, 1 star. But none of the variables are significant. So there's a contradiction. So immediately our mind should go to multi-collinearity problem that we discussed. And to check, we can type VIF and our model is M. We simply run this. So it's not going to let me calculate VIF because we need to exclude E here. So I'm going to type minus E. So include everything but exclude E. Still picture is same, like it doesn't change much. Nothing is significant, but at least now you can calculate VIF. So remember, we were thinking about VIF as a thumb rule should be less than 10. When you start seeing numbers in thousands, obviously there is a big problem. Now the question is like, what should we remove? It's not that we remove all ABCDs because the value is high. So we can revisit this plot and E is already out. So this high correlation of 0.97 is not really a problem. That way probably D can stay. Now C has all kinds of problems, although it is correlated with porosity, but it also has 3 star correlations with independent variables. So obviously this can be ignored, but this cannot be. We have to now choose between C and D. So which one we should exclude? That's one choice we need to make between C and D. One way to look at it is correlation between D and response is smaller for D, negative 0.32, and it is higher for C. So if I have to choose between C and D, probably we should choose C to keep, and we should drop D because it's not contributing that much to the model. With that reasoning, I'm going to drop D and rerun the model. And you'll start seeing that now some of the variables start appearing statistically significant. And rerun variance inflation factor. So A has a problem. Now it's over 12, but B and C seem okay. After dropping D, B and C seem to be fine. So the natural choice is going to be we drop A, because you can see A is highly correlated with B and it is also correlated with C. E is anyway out, but it's going to create problems for B and C. So we can take out A. So I'm going to say minus A, rerun. So you can see B and C are statistically significant and depth is not. And in this model, if you check VIFs, so now things look under control. All VIF values are like much below 10. They are closer to 1. This could be our model. Any question?
Professor, can you explain again your reasoning between C and D?
So first what I did was, after removing E, because E is not contributing, A, B, C, D, that information already contains whatever is known about variable E. So after excluding E from the model, if we calculate VIFs, you see all kinds of problems. So multicollinearity problem is very severe. But the question is, when the values are more than 10, should we get rid of everything or just one by one? So my suggestion is like go one by one, not like everything, because things change when you drop a variable. So although like all these are flagged, so it doesn't mean that we should get rid of A, B, C, D totally. So now we have to choose between A, B, C, D. What should we keep and what should we drop? Recently we dropped E, so this is anyway out, and D had a strong correlation with E. But D also has strong correlation with C. You can see 0.68, so 3-star correlation. So if I have to choose between D and C, obviously we cannot keep both because the correlations are high. So because E is gone, actually this entire column is irrelevant. If you look at the rows for C and compare the value for like porosity, so the only problem is 0.68 and that is with D, and other problems are not there as far as multicollinearity is concerned. And between D and C, C has a higher contribution to the model, negative 0.72 versus 0.32. So I would prefer C in the model compared to D. So that's why I eliminated D first. So when you eliminate D from the model, then even if there are 1-star, 2-star, 3-star correlations, so all that column goes away. And you can see just by eliminating D, VIF for B came down significantly. C also is now under 10 and A is more than 10 still. So now the choice is only between A, B and C. But if you see, A has problems with B, negative 0.77. Also with C, it has high correlation. So if we have to choose like either we choose only A or we choose both B and C. I decided that let's get rid of A and keep B and C, because whatever cells are remaining, those are like small correlations. So they are unlikely to create multicollinearity problem. And that's also verified from this. After A, D, E are eliminated, you can see VIF values come down drastically. So that's how we address VIF. So that's actually one approach of handling multicollinearity. But think about a situation where you have like 500 independent variables and multi-collinearity problem. It is bound to happen with so many variables. Some variables end up with the high correlation. So it's going to be very difficult to really create a huge scatter plot or correlation matrix and go one by one. It's easier here because we have like number of variables that we can count on our fingers. So very easy to handle. But when you have a lot of variables, we have to go with some other methods, like more of like machine learning kind of methods, where it can be automated. You could use lasso regression, or a related method is called ridge regression, or a combination of the two, elastic net. So lasso, ridge and elastic net regressions, what they do is when you have lot of independent variables and the possibility of multi-collinearity is bound to be there, so it uses some kind of regularization method which shrinks the coefficients based on the methodology and avoids situations where multi-collinearity problem will be present. Another very useful method is principal component analysis, PCA. What happens in PCA is run on all independent variables, and the variables get converted into combination, a linear combination of your independent variables in such a way that any two principal components are perpendicular to each other. So they are at 90 degrees, meaning that there is no correlation. So correlation between principal component 1 versus principal component 2 will be 0. So instead of doing a multiple regression based on independent variables, people do multiple linear regression based on the principal components. And typically, like depending on your data, your principal components may be top 3 or top 5, may include 80% of the variability in the data. Obviously, it will not contain like 100%, but it may capture 80-90% of the variability in the data with the help of just few principal components. If you have 500 variables, and if you have to work only with 10 principal components, so you can see that it becomes much easier. And principal component also can help in a situation where you have too many variables but too few rows. That's called like high dimensional data, where number of rows are much less than number of variables. So there again, one can do principal component. You can convert like a lot of variables into linear combination in the form of principal components and then do regression on that. So there are different strategies people use. But let me do one more thing and then I'm actually going to stop. In your RStudio Cloud, if you go to Files, if you click Upload, so I think it is under Downloads for me. So this is the file. When we say OK, you'll see vehicle file has been uploaded. So this has a CSV format, comma separated variable format. So that's one of the formats, and usually the most common format for working with data in R. But if my computer had this vehicle.csv file in the past for whatever reason, it may change names and create some issues. So what we'll do is we'll rename this. So there's a rename option. So instead of one, simply call this vehicle.csv. We don't want those parentheses and numbers. Let me call this read a CSV file. So how to read a CSV file in RStudio? After reading the file, let's say I want to store this file and give it a new name in R, my data, put an arrow, and for reading CSV file, we simply say read.csv. And Within quotation mark, you have to put name of the file. I can see in the fourth window, it's vehicle.csv. So this should be the default directory, I think, for RStudio Cloud. So when I run this, and then if you do str my data, you can see that this data set has 1624 observations in 7 columns. And the variable in which I'm mainly interested is LH, LC, and MC. This is actually data from vehicle failures, and LH is labor hours, how much time it takes to repair a car. LC is labor cost, and MC is material cost. So somebody replaced a material, like let's say engine was not functioning well and entire engine was replaced with a new one, or maybe a small thing. So LH, LC, and MC. Mileage is like what was the mileage of the car at the time of failure, and so on. So suppose I do a pairs plot, and we want only first, second, third. So let's say LH, LC, and MC. So fourth, fifth, and sixth columns. 4, 5, and 6. Let's see if this works. Suppose I want to make a regression model for labor cost based on other two. So I could do. This is important for automotive companies who get charged by dealerships for vehicle repairs. So they want to make sure that different dealerships are charging fairly, and the relation is not like very odd for some states compared to others. Now suppose I want to study this relationship only for those vehicles which have mileage of more than 25,000 miles. So I can create a new data from this my data, and with square brackets I can refer to rows and columns. So first number is always rows. So I want all the rows where my data $mileage is greater than 25,000 miles, and after comma I don't put anything. That means I want all the columns. Remember that my data has 1624. Now if I create this new data, this new has only 545. Suppose this was my interest. I want to see what happens after 25,000 miles because of certain type of failures. So we can run the model. So labor cost as a function of labor hours plus material cost for this new data. And then you can do summary M. Both labor hours and material costs are statistically significant. They explain 96% of the variability. Between the two, LH has much higher contribution. Response or labor cost changes by $72.43 for unit change in labor hours. So huge impact, and that you can see even from the scatter plot. And material cost has actually negative correlation with labor cost. You have relation of 0.57 between LH and MC, which are both independent variables. So let's check our VIF if there's any problem. So although correlation is 0.57, but VIF doesn't flag any multi-collinearity issue here. It's not contributing in any way to make the estimates of our coefficients unstable, or it's not going to affect the standard errors in a big way. All those problems that come up with multi-collinearity. Any unanswered question? So one question is, does VIF method work with continuous variables only? Just for the sake of this example, I have one variable which is in my data. We have one variable which is supposed to be a factor variable. So let me convert that into factor. It's called state. first of all I convert this into state and check structure. So now it is a factor variable. We keep this greater than 25,000 just for keeping it similar, and then new. So new, and then connect it to pipe filter state equal. So let's say we want California or state equal Florida FL. So suppose we only do 2 states. Now we do plus state. You can see now state is also significant. Check VIF. So although state is a factor variable, but we can always calculate VIF easily. To answer your question, does it work only for continuous variables? No, it can work for factor 2. Earlier question was why do we keep depth? Actually, we could have got rid of the depth. I didn't do that, but you could have removed depth also. I think you are talking about this model, and depth is not significant, so let's get rid of that. So that will be more appropriate. That's a more appropriate model. You don't lose much because depth was not significant. So 93 versus about 93. And if no more questions, I'm going to stop here. I'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Good night.